Gauteng MEC for Education, Panyaza Lesufi, says he hopes that the matric learners would be allowed to go back to class. He says today all education MECs will meet with the Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, to present the plans that will rescue the academic year. However, Lesufi says as the province, they will not risk the lives of learners. He says they first need to protect the schooling environment to ensure that children are safe. Now, this pandemic, COVID-19, has undoubtedly affected, the 2020 academic year with learners not going to school. Now, George Idi is an educational expert, the CEO of the Answer series, and is joining us on Skype and sharing tips for learners on how to study independently and also share tips on how parents can support and assist their children during this time. George, very good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Sampiwe. Great to be here.
Let's take this conversation further. And any tips perhaps you might, or words of advice that you may have that you can share with learners as they may be feeling very anxious right now, I would imagine?
Yes, sure. I would love to share a few things. So this great disaster that's hit the country and hit the world has also presented a certain challenge to education, specifically the lack of in-school time and teacher time and learning time in the classroom. What has always remained a golden opportunity for a learner is if they can, at some point in their schooling career, start to truly own their own learning process. And whether it's a welcome scenario or not, learners are now thrust into this reality where it's going to be very difficult to recover the schooling time that's been lost. And now the challenge is, how soon can learners get onto the train of owning their own learning process? And I want to share that the Answer series, the business that I lead, got its name in 1975 when Anne Edie, then a young maths teacher, decided it was in the interest of the learner to provide them with highly detailed memorandums to the examination papers that were written in those times. And that kind of went against the whole spirit of information in those days where, schools and teachers held information tightly and learners only could get what they could get their hands on. Then it was a case of how can we equip the learner such that when they are dedicated and working late at night and on their own, they're not wanting for answers. And hence the Answer series was born. And in that time, since 1975, the business has risen to become South Africa's #1 selling study guide series, supporting all major subjects in high school. And I think, one of the things that really breaks my heart right now is that there are a lot of learners out there who would have loved to have been working in this time or are really anxious about and holding in high regard their outcomes for this year. They're now having to engage in a catch-up program. But all hope is not lost. If you are able, as a learner, and consequently I'd like to make some comments as a teacher and a parent, if you're able to take ownership of your own learning process now, there is still plenty of time, given the right decisions that you make now, to succeed at the end of the year. And then how this translates to useful considerations for teachers and also for parents is that all teachers know that they have it best when their learners are owning their learning process and they don't have to carry the full burden of having to teach every minute of every lesson and that being the only reality that learner experiences. Equally for parents, the sooner you can be that coach to help your child to learn what works best for them, making sure they've got the right materials in front of them, to cover the scenarios of when they do have internet access or don't have internet access, the better. And grade 12 and the final examinations, in my opinion, if these principles are adopted, will actually be a year where a new form of learning has been catalyzed, even though the circumstances are dire.
George, you also talk of the parents having to coach the children. And I would imagine this is not only a difficult time for the learners, but the parents and the legal guardians as well, who are tasked with the responsibility of helping and supporting their children during this difficult time. And, I suppose that most of them do not necessarily have an appropriate academic background to impart on these children. So how can these parents support their children during this time?
I think it's a fantastic point, because what you really want to not have happen is have an anxious child be supported by an anxious guardian or parent. So the invitation to those parents and overseers of home-based learning is try to access that part of you that is as wise as you possibly can be in those moments. That the message of there is time, you can do this, we're going to do this carefully, we're going to take it step by step. But of course, it doesn't make sense for a parent to try to become the teacher or to become the expert. Okay. For instance, Answer Series Study Guide has a step-by-step guided process through the CAPS curriculum in South Africa. A resource such as this is the kind of thing that's going to mean that the time that one does spend in doing studying is great bang for buck. So those are the kinds of considerations that parents should be strongly considering.
You're making a very valid point there when you said that the parents don't necessarily have to be the teacher, but they need to, pass on the knowledge that will be best accepted by the learners. And I understand the study guides are free for teachers. George, how can they access them?
That's right, they're free for teachers. If you go to our website, theanswer.co.za, you will be able to find out all the information to access your free study guides. We're doing it in partnership with ebook provider Snaplify, but all the information will be there on the website. And if you're a learner or a parent, you can also access the ebooks. They're incredibly affordably priced, considering general levels of educational material. Literally, those resources are available there, and the fostering of independent learning.
We're out of time, unfortunately, George, but just a quick one. What do you hope will come out of that meeting with the Basic Education Minister and the MECs for education?
Well, it seems that a phased approach back into schooling is unavoidable for the safety of everyone. As a consequence, we're expecting that schooling will be delayed and further schooling time will be lost. I can't see how this won't happen. On the upside, what has happened in the last week is that educational materials have moved into being level 4 level sector. So those who are at home somewhat stranded from their materials will be able to go out and acquire the relevant materials to support them while studying at home.
All right. George Eddy, the CEO of the Answer series, joining us via Skype. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.